All right, Frank, ask your question.
Okay, so in this video, we're going to have a discussion about how God loves us and how He feels when we make decisions that send us to hell.
Okay, how does God feel? God uh, hasn't the established emotions that humans feel. He doesn't feel in relation to a separateness, but into the oneness that is part of Him. Everything is a part of God. Every person, every soul. So he doesn't have this personal and separate relation. It's more about uh, parts of himself, parts of what he is, in relation to other parts of what he is. And these other parts of what he is um, make bad decisions. These other souls existing in material reality, and when we choose to drag ourselves down into a more negative dimension, to a more negative relationship with God, God tends to, I wouldn't say desire, but the whole system He has designed for us is meant to urge us back into Himself, merge us back, or urge us to meet with Him on His plane. And when we meet with Him, we eventually join with Him, because since everything was created by God, everything came from Him, and the whole system of karma, of reincarnation, of the multiverse, in which these laws exist in, is meant to bring every single atom in creation back, every single uh, phase of consciousness, um, every single type of consciousness that He's ever sent out is meant to come back to Him and be purified through the process of coming back to Him, and join with Him ultimately in eternity, in infinity, in the ultimate bliss. And that's basically how God loves us, is that He wants us to become the infinity that He is, to join back into Himself. Uh, so that basically ends the question, but you can go ahead and continue on as far
Yeah,
as what you're
yeah, I'd
asking.
like to elaborate on that because we had this conversation earlier about if how God loves us and does God send us to hell, or do we choose to send ourselves? And I think you explained before, it's separation, right? That some people.
For basically, the further down we go from God, the further our choices um, inflict upon us a negative reaction with our soul. Uh, the soul identified with the body, increasing into an ever negative pull down towards negative manifestation, hellish manifestation, demonic manifestation. When that happens, we basically, our strain on our souls extends. Our relation to our souls departs from what it should be. The ego tears at the soul. It forces the soul to come down when the ego chooses to act incorrectly. When the ego chooses to identify with the body and the things that are not infinite, are not immortal, then that's when it tears at our soul and forces our soul to come down, because we do have free will, but the free will that we have is in relation to the ego and the soul. And with the ego, we do have free choice, but this free choice can bolster the ego and force the soul to come down, even though the soul's ultimate nature is to be free, to be immortal, to be beyond creation and with God. So when that happens, when we are pulled down, uh, the soul becomes more distant. Our sense of soul, our sense of spirit, our sense of immortality becomes very finite. And it becomes finite to the extent that we become smaller and smaller and smaller of spirit. And eventually, we can become so infinitesimally small that we don't just incarnate as human, but we start incarnating as animals. We start incarnating as insects, even as elements like earth and water, and eventually as demons. And this, because God is infinite, this infinite descent is also possible, though it doesn't always. The whole system is designed to make sure that we don't infinitely descend. So a soul never just infinitely descends without a point where it realizes that, okay, I need to start going back up. I need to start experiencing this bliss that God is. And I hope that explains that. But go ahead, ask a question based on that.
That's interesting because this descent is not like normal gravity, where gravity actually
pulls you
at a steady rate.
It's a choice. Choice after choice.
Right. This descent can pull you at a rate so fast that you all of a sudden you wake up. Next thing you know, you're a serial killer because your mind is so possessed.
And the funny thing is, there's little realizations along the way, all the way down the ladder of progression towards God and descent from God. All along this ladder, there's realizations that come from the soul. The soul naturally urges us to go back up because it wants to return from where it came. It wants to return to God.
It wants to experience happiness.
It wants to experience happiness, bliss, infinity.
But what happens when the soul it can no longer experience happiness?
Honestly, that is impossible. The soul can always experience happiness, but it has to choose to experience happiness. The soul cannot eternally fall without having these experiences of, oh, maybe I should get back up. Maybe I should go back to something that doesn't feel as small, as infinitesimal, as dragging, as negative, as a downward path, a left-hand path towards Satan is. The soul naturally wants to drag us back up. So somebody who's truly evil, that really wants to be pulled down, who embraces the fall, they have to do it through continual choice of the negative over the positive, of sadness, misery, anger, pain over bliss.
This is what I'm thinking, is that choice becomes so real. It's actually the partaker of the
decisions
is actually, they're looking for peace, they're looking for rest. So instead of going to the side to where they find peace and happiness, they're seeking destruction so much that
they're seeking power, because personal power is part of the descent. The only reason a soul, an ego that is basically commandeering the soul, the only reason that it would fall further is because it's seeking power in some degree. It was seeking power over its current situation, but personal power, not a release of power, an acceptance that, okay, I don't have power. I am looking up to the divine, up to God, to accept His power.
Right. So,
and if we don't accept that power, if the soul continually wants personal power, then the descent can continue. But it's a decision every single moment, and that's basically how evil you have to be to completely descend infinitely. Is that you have to make a decision every single moment. It's not just about 1, 2, a million, a trillion decisions. It's about constant decision to be pulled down towards a desire for personal power over or a release of desire and the want for power.
Right. So in a sense, it's the actual sense of ultimate destruction will actually bring on a sense of actual utopia.
You can gain enough personal power to bring about certain degrees of happiness, certain degrees of pleasure, but true happiness doesn't last the small amount of time that personal power provides it. Yes, because true happiness is something that is part of eternity, so it basically is infinite. Pleasure, numbness, finite happiness, those are the things that a demonic kind of soul can have. But they're only things that a demonic soul can have for very small amounts of time. Very small amounts of time against eternity are futile. The only true happiness we can have is upward expanding consciousness, upward expanding bliss, a release of the desire for personal, this is mine, that is yours, or even everything is mine. It's all about releasing the idea of mine and allowing yourself to not want to possess anything, not wanting to possess, and not wanting to gain the personal power to possess above others or more than others or what others have. But yeah, go ahead.
No, I think that's it.
All right, we'll go ahead and end the video there.
So power can be both negative and positive. It just depends on what side.
It depends on if you're seeking personal power or releasing your desire to possess everything that you think will give you pleasure, will give you happiness. But ultimately, possession, wanting something to only be yours,
right?
Nobody else's, that will drag you down.
You're ultimately looking for a point, whether it's negative or positive, that you could reach that's going to basically reset. That so you want to destroy yourself. You don't care. You're a serial killer. You're a murderer.
Yeah.
Right? You don't care. You know you're going to get caught, but that's the actual point. Is that you're going to
because and a lot of the reason serial killers and murderers and terrible people like that, demonic souls, want to get caught is because deep down in their soul, they want to be caught so that they can reset, like you said, so that they can reset and start back up towards the ascent.
Right.
And that's why it takes a decision, like every single moment that you feel a desire, that you feel a want to possess things for yourself and no one else.
So that's the far end of the spectrum. So it could be something else that's bothering you. For example, some bad habit. So you'll continue.
The bad habit, but see, the bad habit wants to feed. The whole point of a bad habit is to feed a false understanding of pleasure, of happiness. That if you gain enough of this, if you use enough of this drug, if you drink enough, if you gain enough of this property, if you hurt enough people, even if that brings you pleasure, eventually it will stop, and eventually you'll start to realize that to feed this habit, to feed this behavior, you're going to have to gain more and more that you cannot gain, and the only way to gain those things is to completely fall and not worry about true happiness and completely delve into and place your happiness on the pedestal that requires continuous numbness, continuous satiation of desire. And when we do that, we can continually fall, but it requires a continuous decision to do that. It's not something that our souls naturally want to do.
Right.
But I think we'll go ahead and end the video there. Thank you everybody for watching, and y'all have a great one.